Welcome, everyone. I'm James Rhee. I am the newly appointed John H. Johnson Endowed Chair and Professor of Entrepreneurship at Howard University. I am so honored to have the opportunity to contribute to the Howard community and all of its friends, past, present, and future, for the next several years. And special thank you goes to Dr. Frederick, and of course, Dean Lawson Borders, and the faculty and students at the Cathy Hughes School of Communications. So I'm an impact investor, educator, CEO, and general entrepreneur, and you can learn more about me at redhelicopter.com, and we'll get more into it when I meet you all on campus. But one really fun part of my role at Howard is going to be bringing together my friends to curate this entrepreneurship speaker series for you. Over the course of the next several years, we'll explore the systems and the leadership running those systems, underlying transformation, innovation, and the future of capitalism and democracy in our society. And along with my friends, who are all leaders and pioneers in business, tech, media, entertainment, law, philanthropy, academia, and some of them, yes and yes on many of those things, we'll dig into this interplay and explore the difficult to see relationships between seemingly unrelated systems and communities. We'll dig for truth and showcase remarkable leaders and hold them up to you as role models and introduce you to what is success and the journey towards success. My guest and I will be speaking to the students at Howard with the intention of the whole world just eavesdropping and listening in and hopefully contributing, learning themselves. So the journey is going to be comprised in the beginning of entrepreneurship. With each guest will be like this and overarching as well, just systems of self and story and brand and neuroscience. And then we'll move on to other areas in terms of how that manifests in capitalism, in jobs, in law, in product engineering and tech. And so hopefully that all makes sense. And I look forward to getting to know everyone. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce my friend and just a remarkable person, Carla Harris. Thank you, Carla, for joining me on this first inaugural speaker series episode.
Well, it is quite an honor to be the first in what I know is going to be an amazing series of conversations and an award-winning podcast on top of all of that. So thanks for having me, James.
Well, thank you. And so I wanted to make and introduce you to the students of Howard, and many of them, they know who you are. But I wanted to do it in a different way, if you wouldn't mind, right? Because your bio is so impressive, and a lot of times we have to lay things out linearly. And as entrepreneurs, we know that life is not linear, that it's important to see interconnectivity in more circles. So if you wouldn't mind if I could take a crack at this, and if I get anything wrong, I apologize, please correct me. But so Carla Harris. So all of this is in one big circle. You are an award-winning executive in the financial industry. You are a vice chairwoman of Morgan Stanley, and you've been there for 30 years?
34.
34 years. And you've had so many responsibilities there in equity capital markets, wealth management. You have global revenue generating responsibilities and connectivity at the firm right now. You've achieved so much at Morgan Stanley. You've been recognized by Fortune magazine and all the important business periodicals and conventions. That's Carla. And there's another Carla, right? There's a civic Carla who chaired the board of the Executive Leadership Council, who's on the board of Sesame Street. You're an overseer at Harvard. You're on the board of St. Vincent's Hospital. There's more, but there's this Carla. There's another Carla that I've seen you perform at the Apollo, right? I know that you've sold out Carnegie Hall 5 times. Mm-hmm. You're an accomplished musician, singer. There's another Carla that you are a global speaker and an author of 2 books that every Howard student should be reading, Strategize to Win and Expect to Win. That Carla is also a Carla. And you are a mother, a wife, and a general friend to just many. So all of these Carlas are part of one big Carla. And so I wanted to sort of start there. I get the impression just from knowing you that the Carla that grew up before attending Harvard College was maybe not that dissimilar to the Carla that we are talking to today without the quote credentials at that point. Is that fair, I think?
That is a fair statement, and that is a true statement, James. I have always been someone who wanted to pursue all the different things that I was interested in. And my parents obviously instilled in me that whatever you were going to do, make sure that you gave it your all, that you were excellent at it. So the Carla before Harvard was Carla the bowler, who was winning awards as a bowler all over the city of Jacksonville and the state of Florida. In my senior year in high school, I was bowling for scholarship dollars because I needed the money to go to school. There was Carla, the McDonald's associate, who I loved. I loved working at McDonald's, which was my first W-2 job. It was Carla, the mathematician, because I was my grandmother's accountant. She had a very successful business. And when she realized how good I was at math, she fired her accountant from 8th grade to 12th grade. I did all of her sales tax, all of her books, all of that. There was Carla, obviously the daughter, Carla the friend, Carla the singer. I was singing back then. So there were quite a number of Carlas who were firing on all cylinders, foot on the gas back then. So you're right.
Yeah, I would bet too that you're the core personality streak that I've seen in you over the years, and you see it in just all the initiatives that we're going to talk about a little bit later in the interview. You're one of the most generous people that I've met.
Thank you.
Right. And you are also, and I think it's related, I would love for you to comment on this. You are also one of the most successful entrepreneurs that I've met.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, how does that sort of fit together? Like generosity, just sort of, giving back. And I know that you have sayings about, there's a saying that you have about just helping people, like giving
Yes,
back.
we are blessed so that we can be a blessing to somebody else. That's right.
So how do you reconcile that in this day and age where, people equate entrepreneurship with innovation and money and capitalism, but some of the best entrepreneurs are very generous. So how does that
No,
work?
no question about that. And when you look at any kind of philanthropy statistics, you will see that there is a large portion of the philanthropic dollars that actually come from people, successful people, and people who are entrepreneurs. There's obviously corporate giving and other institutional giving, but a lot of the philanthropic dollars come from people. And frankly, James, my philosophy has always been the things that we go through, the things that we endure, the things that we acquire, it's really not for us. If you really want to amplify that and multiply that, then you got to understand how the circle goes. And for me, the circle goes, he gives, I get, I give. And every time it completes, it goes around again, it gets even stronger and stronger. And as an entrepreneur, there'll be so many things that you will need that you can't anticipate, that the business plan does not anticipate. So the more that you approach your life from a position of giving and of being of service, miraculously, you will find that things will also come back your way in ways that you can't even articulate today because you don't even know that it's out there. And I'm not suggesting in any way that you give because you will get, but I'm just telling you that after looking back over my life, I gave just because I could. I gave my time because I could. I gave my intellect because I could. And I knew something about something that somebody else needed to know. I gave of my relationships because somebody needed to meet this person. I could connect them. And I did it just because I could. And now when I reflect over the whole thing, I can sort of connect the dots and see how those things might have been interrelated or something that I didn't anticipate happened. And, now you have to think, well, maybe it's because I invested in the bank of giving and of being of service. And this is how the bank returns a yield, if I can put it in financial language.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard for all of us to see that the most important assets in life are the ones you can't see.
That's right.
Right. And it's really takes patience to really slow down and measure those assets because they're more difficult to measure.
That's right.
Yeah, it's when you were there was a story that I read about when you were a bowling champ. And by the way, my first W-2 job was washing dishes at Red Lobster. And my mom used to be so concerned because my hands were the water was so hot. Like
Oh,
the commercial
wow. Yeah.
dishwashers. But when you were applying to Harvard undergrad, right? And I went there too, right? we almost overlapped. You had a college counselor who sort of said, despite all the things that you were good at, that he said, or he or she said, not to apply.
Yeah,
Right? And told you not to. Well,
that's
can you
right.
tell the students about sort of that and how
Absolutely.
you overcame that?
Thank you so much for that question, James, because I love being able to tell this story, especially the students, because the moral of the story is never count yourself out. And for Pete's sake, don't let anybody else count you out. So let's assume this person really had my best interest at heart. And when I went to see my guidance counselor as a junior in high school, and by the way, James, let me say this to the students. I I did not have aspirations at that point to go to an Ivy League school. Frankly, that wasn't anywhere in my mindset or psyche. My parents always knew that I would go to a college because I was pretty smart. They always assumed also that I would go to a great school and get a scholarship because I was so smart. So it's not like they really prepared, financially for me to go to school. It's not like they said, oh, you must go to an Ivy League school. However, I went to a really great high school, and I'm also very self-aware, and I listen, I understand what's going on around me. And my classmates who were also in honors classes, and I went to a predominantly white high school, Catholic high school, they kept saying, oh, to each other, did you send your application in to Wharton? Did you send your application in to Yale? I got my application in for Harvard, and I'm listening to all of this. And at that point, my aspiration was to go to UCLA. Why, James? Because my favorite aunt lived in LA. That was it. Nothing more complicated than that. And all of a sudden now, my interest was piqued because I didn't hear these students talking about University of Florida, or Florida State, or FAMU, or any. And so I started looking into some of these schools. And of course, with a little research, you realize that these are the top schools in the country, and I've always aspired to do the best that I could, or to whatever was the top. I wanted to make sure that I could associate myself or get a shot at it. So I went to see the guidance counselor, and I said, oh, I understand that the guy from Cornell is coming because they were doing high school business at the time, and I want to sign up for that, and I think I want to go to one of those schools. I want to apply to Cornell and Harvard and Princeton. And he said, oh, don't worry about applying. Those are Ivy League schools. Don't worry about applying to those schools. Those schools are really difficult to get into. And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, they rarely take more than 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20. So don't worry about applying to those schools. You should apply to the Florida schools. You will get in. You will go to a great school. So don't worry about that. And being the obedient young lady that I was, I applied to all the Florida schools that he told me to apply to, but I also applied to all of the Ivy League schools that I wanted to apply to, and I got into them all. So that's why I started with the moral of the story. Don't let somebody else count you out. And for Pete's sake, don't count yourself out. Because if I had listened to him and stopped there, I would never have had the amazing opportunity that I had at Harvard undergrad. I might not have had the access to Harvard Business School, Harvard Law School, or get myself exposed to a Wall Street internship, and therefore start to build a career on Wall Street. So you don't know until you try. Always, always get to the plate and take the at bat. The worst that can happen is that you strike out. But now you will have had the experience of being at the plate, and you will have some knowledge about how to swing differently the next time.
I love that advice. And I was watching one of the speeches you gave to women entrepreneurs, I believe at Morgan Stanley. And some of the phrases you used, it's hard because we're all sensitive to failing, but no fear.
That's right.
Apologize later.
Right.
Like try and apologize, make mistakes. And that's a hard lesson. Particularly at a younger age, right? Because we all want to achieve and succeed, and you think that a setback is going to derail you. Where did you get that from? Like, who would be that person? How does a student at Howard right now who's saying, "Look, I want to try some things. The world is in a very interesting place, which we'll get to later too. And it's scary."
Yeah.
So, how do you find people that can be that person for you?
Yes.
That you could, how does that work?
Well, first of all, the advice that I would give to the students is know who you are, right? Because if you don't know who you are, it is very difficult to discern when somebody has your best interests at heart and is giving you advice that's going to be the best for you. So really know who you are. Second of all, be a really good listener, because the more you lean in to listen to what people are saying, the more you can figure out whether or not they're coming from the right place or whether or not they're giving you the right advice. Third, don't be afraid, frankly, to go up and approach people. Because what I figured out, James, is half the time they are more afraid of you than you are of them. And the reason they're not reaching out to you is that, frankly, they don't know how, right? So don't be afraid to approach anyone. And if they rebuff you, if they're a curmudgeon, you just simply say next, right? And go on to the next person. But you don't let one person's rejection or one person's gruffness deter you on your aspiration of being the best that you can and building the network that you can build. So observing other people in the context of knowing who you are gives you some guidance around who can you approach, what kinds of questions you can ask that person, how, and just try. Every single try gives you one of two things. It either gives you the blessing, i.e. you get the thing you were going for, you got it, or it gives you the lesson and tells you now how to do it differently the next time. And both of those are valuable. And that's what students need to understand. Both are valuable. There are very few things in life that are irreparable. So you make a mistake, but you learn something. The issue is, understand this: every time you fail or anytime you make a mistake, that is not the thing that singles you out. That is not the thing that makes you special, because everybody makes a mistake. What makes you special is how and if you get up. Because you'd be surprised how many people will allow a mistake or failure to become a major limitation. They don't go any further than that. They don't move past that. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, as Suzanne DePass once said to me when she came to our Harvard Business School class, and I asked her a question, she said, I used no as a vitamin. Every time I got no, it was something that made me stronger, just like a vitamin. And I kept going and let it fuel me to the next ask and the next ask. When she did her award-winning show called Lonesome Dove, she recounted that there were dozens of no's that she got before she got the green light and the money to produce that film. And it was an award-winning film, right? But if she had stopped at the second or the third or the fifth no, it would never have gotten out into the public domain.
Carla, the advice you're giving, I wish I had heard it when I was when I was in my early 20s. Like I studied, and this is for all the non-business entrepreneurs, because part of what we're talking about right now, entrepreneurship is not just for business. It's a mindset. All of us in life are entrepreneurs. So just for the students, very quickly, I studied history and literature at Harvard. I taught high school after college. I went to law school to be a public defender. And I ended up being in finance and investing for 20 plus years now. And I was told no all the time. Like, people said, no, you are a lawyer, you're a teacher. And people don't, it's hard. And if I took the no's very hard in the beginning. And I said, wow, at 24, 25, my whole life is now defined in front of me. And it was very difficult in the beginning. And I know it's harder sometimes also, right? For let's face it, for women and people of color, those no's, they sound more no-ish many times, don't they?
Yeah, they sound definitive. And that's why I'm so glad that we're having this conversation, so that your students will know that they are not definitive, and nor are they defining, right? So you understand, do your best to understand why you got the no, what might have been the objective reason, especially if you're trying to raise capital, let's say, as an entrepreneur. Did this person not really understand the industry that I am proposing to prosecute? Have they not dealt with somebody that looked like me, and so they are associating more risk associated with me? How can I de-risk the conversation or get them more comfortable that there's not risk associated with it? But don't take it personally, and don't let it be a limitation. And if it's somebody that has a bias, then it's their loss, and it's going to be the gain of someone who is smart enough to bet on you. So it's really the lens you prefer to look at. And let me say one last thing while we're on this subject, James. I implore you as students, no matter where you came from and no matter what your outcome, your outlook might be because of what you have been through, really try to hone in on a muscle of positivity. Really try to turn everything on its head. My friends, some of my closest friends call me Snoopy, and not very many people know that. And they call me Snoopy, James, because they said, no matter what it is, Carla's going to find a
Yeah.
positive spin on it. Because Snoopy in the Peanuts is sort of always out for the party, right? So no matter what it is, I'll find a positive spin. But I will tell you, I do think that that is the thing that has allowed me, James, not to be um, impeded by the negative, I'm going to call it the negative things that are out there that are true facts. Like you said earlier, we're in a funny world. Well, some of those things go right over my head because I'm not looking for them. I'm not thinking about them. I'm always thinking about the can do, the will do. How do I get it done? The fact that it can be done, right? That is what I'm focusing on. So if I'm frustrated, now I'm trying to figure out where's the opening? It's somewhere because the universe would not have delivered me this thought, these resources of networks, this opportunity where I am now. So if it's not happening, I'm missing something. Or maybe the timing is not just right. So if the timing is not just right, that means the universe is giving me more preparation time. So how
Yeah.
can I invest in my readiness? So when it's ready, I can really prosecute. So I'm asking the students to change your frame from negativism to thinking about what's the positive thing out of this. Even if it's a bad thing, you learn something from it. So ask yourself, boy, that was rough. What did I learn from that? What's the lesson? Either way, you get something. And that lens, that frame of mind will certainly propel you towards success.
Yeah. And like finding the people is just not just opportunities, right? There are a lot of, let's face it, there's negative people,
That's right.
and those people bring you down. Like, it's to find the one positive person, and those people make all the difference in your life, right?
That's right. And sometimes it's your family. Let's face it. If we're going to call a thing, James, let's call that. Sometimes, people of color have had such a hard time that there are people in their family who feel like the right way to protect themselves is to always go to the negative. They're never going to let you do that, or this is not going to happen, or you'll never be able to do that. So even when they are the negative voices, are the voices that are closest to you, with all due respect, you let them, air their voice and say, I appreciate your perspective. Thanks a lot. But then you go to your positive lens and hug it hard and move on.
One of the things that you speak so eloquently on is going back to they're really those assets. I think you refer to them as there are two types of currencies, right? And I may get the exact words wrong, but it's a let's call it hard financial currency, transactional currency, and then like social currency and relationship currency, right? This currency is an asset. Going back to the other thing we talked about, it's sometimes really hard to see, so it's hard to invest in, right?
Yeah,
So what you're talking about right now is building up this currency.
that's right. And the terms that I use in my second book, Strategize to Win, is performance currency and relationship currency. And the performance currency is the currency that is generated by your delivering that which was asked of you and a little bit extra. So every time that you perform above somebody's expectations, you absolutely generate performance currency. And performance currency is valuable for three reasons. When you are in a professional context, either as an entrepreneur or working in a company, it will certainly buy you a reputation. Number two, early in your career and early on in any new environment, it gets you paid and promoted. And number three, it may even attract a sponsor. But the sponsor, going back to the relationship, is the person that carries your paper into the room. And they use their currency, their relationship currency on your behalf so that you get the promotion, you get the capital, you get the next great opportunity, you get the great bonus. Even as an entrepreneur, somebody has to be in the room when the bank is deciding to loan you money.
Yeah.
There is a loan officer who is presenting your case to the rest of the loan committee as to why you are a good risk and why they should loan you that money. When somebody is thinking about investing in your company, when they do their due diligence on you, they call around, tell me a little bit about James. What is this guy? Is he going to take care of my money? That is a conversation and a decision that is happening behind closed doors, meaning you are not in the room. You are not in that conversation. And those critical decisions about your career, as well as whether or not people will back you as an entrepreneur, those decisions are made when you are not in that room. So the relationship currency is key, because when people decide they're going to bet on you, that has everything to do with the interaction that they will have, that they have had with you. People can look at my resume all day long and say, oh my gosh, look at that. Of course we'll back her. But let me meet her first. If I'm going to give her $1 million, let me meet her. Well, if they do not have a good experience with me, and they do not feel that I'm going to be someone that understands the game, i.e., I need to take care of their capital, it doesn't matter what my resume says, they're not going to invest in me. So building those relationships are key, because when it gets right down to it, that's how people make all the decisions that will matter in your career and frankly in your life as an entrepreneur.
So one of the things on your bio, right? So when I was laughing and saying, oh, there's artist Carla and finance executive Carla and civics Carla, there's lots of great Carlas. In every situation that you're in, you are bringing, there is a through line of a Carla that appears, and that is your reputation, right? Integrity, how you treat people. That Carla is very consistent.
That's right.
In all of those worlds.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And that's why, I loved what you were saying in your introduction to the students around the authenticity and being successful there. And James, I talk all the time about authenticity, because I tell people it is their distinct competitive advantage. Because frankly, nobody can be you the way that you can be you. And we often lose ourselves and we lose our edge when we are trying so hard to be like somebody else. And what you just defined is the true essence of Carla. I'm going to always give you my best, no matter what it is. Now, maybe my best on Wednesday is different than my best on Friday, but it was the best that I had to give that day. And that's going to be consistent. And so everything that you mentioned are through all of those different parts of who I am. And it's important that people take the time, especially while you're in college, because that's when I would argue you really get to know who you are. When you are a freshman, even though you think you know who you are a function of the environment that you have been in for the last 18 years. You are a function of what your parents have told you, the other influence in your life. Even if you think you know what you want to do, you came to college based on what people said. You ought to think about doing X, or you ought to do Y. You don't really find yourself, in my view, until these 4 years of college. So you should be aggressive about figuring out who you are. And then when you have that and you know who you are, then you have to understand that we're all multifaceted. As you said, there is an argumentative you, an intellectual you, there's a frivolous you, there's a pensive you. And once you know who you are and you embrace all the facets, now you can truly bring your authentic self into any kind of environment and really shine. And where young people make the mistake is they think that they have to tell you exactly what's on their mind, or they have to show you every different part of who they are in order to be authentic. But you do not. You bring all of you into any conversation. You bring all of you into any room, and then relax and allow yourself to feel the energy of the room. And then you can meet people where they are. So it might be Carla the singer that comes in the room. It might be Carla the writer. It might be Carla the researcher. It could be Carla the banker. It could be Carla the mama. That's the person that really connects with that client or that investor. But I brought all of them into the room. And now I figure out, where is my audience? Yeah. Where are they? Let me meet them where they are. And that's the Carla that connects authentically. And I wanted to share that with your listeners, because so often people misconstrue what it means to bring your authentic self to the table.
Yeah, I mean, that is a great point. And one of the things I'm very appreciative and actually a little bit envious of, actually, the students at Howard. It is, as a minority myself, I've never had the opportunity to actually be at a university or a place that was where I was the majority, And I think that's a very special opportunity to be at a historically Black university to really
Indeed.
sort of experience that side of oneself, right? That
That's
I've
right.
actually never had that.
Yep. Well, obviously, we both went to the same undergraduate institution. I didn't have that either, and it is empowering, and they should walk into all of that and
Yeah.
understand that and understand what it feels like. So as they go into other environments, they carry that power with them.
You know, one of my favorite things now when we weave in generosity, your career. So you are the executive sponsor, and I think you, I may get this wrong, you initiated, founded the Multicultural Lab, the Innovation Lab at Morgan Stanley. And so I wanted to ask you to just explain to the students at Howard, you may have a lot of future entrepreneurs applying to that lab, but there's a lot of other people listening too. So I want everyone to hear about Morgan Stanley's Multicultural Innovation Lab.
Yes.
But what you've done, you have, it is solving a problem. You're doing it within the context of capitalism. You are shifting 2, 3, 4 systems at the same time. It's part of your job. And it's sort of where civics and executive and finance, Carla, all meet.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the lab and
Yes.
tell us more?
The lab is an in-house accelerator, and I'm sure most of the students are familiar with what an accelerator is. If you know Y Combinator, Techstars, Village Capital, and an accelerator is really, for those who don't know, it is an entity that allows early stage companies to come in and to kind of work out some of their growth issues, and also to get capital, and more importantly, to be exposed also to investors to accelerate their business plan, accelerate the growth of their company, which is why it's called an accelerator as opposed to an incubator. An incubator is when you come in with a really great business plan, and now you're trying to figure out whether or not you have a minimum viable product, or whether or not there really is a market, and you tweak your business plan or decide that you really don't have a really good basis for a company at all. So that's the difference between an incubator and accelerator. By the time you get to an accelerator, it's clear. You have a company, you have an MVP, you know who your target market is. How can you make it go faster and create value in a bigger way? And we are focused on multicultural entrepreneurs and women. And we bring them into the lab and we give them 3 things. We give them cash, in which most accelerators will do. They'll give you a couple $100,000. We do $250,000 in exchange for a single-digit percentage of your company. We give them content, 6 months of content that is specifically designed to help them to develop from being a founder to a CEO, because as you know, James, there is a difference.
Yeah.
And we also connect them to some of our larger investment banking clients that could markedly accelerate the growth of their business, or these guys could be acquirers down the road, or they could be customers. But we do everything we can to connect the dots to try to accelerate that overall growth. So that's what the lab is all about. And we are now sort of in our 7th cohort. Last year, we decided that we were going to double down on the lab. So previously, since 2017, we were bringing in 10 companies per year. Last year, we made the decision that this year we would start doing 20 companies a year. And in a week or so, I'm going to make another big announcement about the lab. So stay tuned on that, James. But to your point about really trying to close the gap, there's an inequity in the distribution of capital. Women get 4% or less of traditional VC dollars. People of color get 2% or less, depending on your source. Some people say 1%. So that is a market inefficiency, which creates a huge commercial opportunity. So that is the area that we're zeroing in on. If we are successful, we will go a long way in closing this gap on the inequity of the distribution of capital.
And so for all the students and listeners, Carla was generous enough to have me on her podcast twice, because I spent 7 years of my life investing in women and people of color, and it was the intersectionality of both. And I think that did a pretty good job working with the ladies to show that there was a big commercial opportunity in backing people of color and women, consumers, founders, and entrepreneurs and leaders.
Absolutely.
And that's how we met.
That's right. And it was a great conversation, because our objective in showcasing you, James, was to put a playbook in the marketplace for those who are somewhat interested in investing in people of color and women, but claim they can't find any, I'm not sure how to do it. How big is that market really? So for those who have trepidation or just plain ignorance about it, we wanted to showcase somebody like you who was successful in finding the opportunities and successful in creating a big return for your investment in that space, so that we can give somebody else a insight into your playbook that they might hopefully adopt it and be able to play in that space themselves. And you did a terrific job. So
Oh,
thank you.
thanks, Carla. And you want everyone to know, like, you need friends to really, it's hard sometimes. It's lonely being an entrepreneur, right?
Oh
Sometimes.
yeah,
And it really is, it's a great joy in life to be with people and to be a person that you want to be the person to proactively reach out and know that people are lonely or struggling, to be generous in that way. It feels good, it's the right thing, and it's also a long-term investment in relationships too.
absolutely.
And so the other thing I get this question a lot about entrepreneurship too. So let's listen to what Carla was saying. Her accelerator is really after you sort of figure out what problem you want to solve, you know who you are, you have sort of an idea that's been formulated, it's working, you breathe, and then Morgan Stanley's going. It's putting accelerant on you, capital and social capital, actually, at the same time. I also get this question. I call you one of the most successful entrepreneurs that I admire in your whole canvas of your life and in business. But I get asked, do I have to start a business to be an entrepreneur? I mean, and I say, well, Carla, she didn't start a standalone business. She's been at Morgan Stanley for 34 years, big company. And then I say, no, I think Carla Harris is extremely entrepreneurial. So can you help reconcile? Can you prove me right to the students? Because some students get intimidated. They say, I don't have, like, they say, I have to go start a business. And sometimes that's really, risk is good, but over risk, sometimes it may not be the right time in your life, right?
Right.
So so explain that. Like, so you have some students who would be interested in going to Morgan Stanley, right? So what would you say to them?
I would say to them that we are in an environment where your entrepreneurialism is going to be valued in almost every context, whether you are in a large organization, which they tend to then call it entrepreneurial because it's in a different house,
Mhm.
versus if you start your own thing. And I would say that the beauty of starting a business within an organization, frankly, is that you can use the platform of that organization to really scale and generate quickly. And you can impact even more people, if you will, than the time that it takes sometimes to start your own thing. So either way, you're going to need the skills of being able to see opportunity when it's not apparent to everybody else. You're going to need outstanding execution skills to get done whatever it is that you're trying to get done. You're absolutely right, James, that I have entrepreneurs all around me. I mean, look at Latoya, who you know very well,
Yep.
who works with me on the podcast. Neither one of us had podcast experience when we started the podcast. We have now won a Webby and 10 Marcon Awards, right? So we went from zero blank sheet of paper very quickly to excellence in an industry where we had no experience. That takes entrepreneurial chops. That takes a vision. That takes being able to plot it out, i.e. put together, a business development plan around it. That takes execution. That takes follow through. That takes building relationships, because there were some people who thought we could do it, some people who didn't think we could do it, people who didn't think we could do it. We had to leverage their expertise. So all of the things that you would need to do if we went outside today and said, okay, let's start a podcast, we would have to do it. It still took the same skills from an entrepreneurial perspective. So if you are not comfortable sort of having your own building, hanging out your own shingle and saying that, this is mine, but you want the thrill and the experience of being an entrepreneur, every company is going to be looking for someone who can come up with that innovative idea, that can add another leg to their growth stool, who can figure out a way to reposition a business. Look at all the consumer brands that are 80 years old, 90 years old, 100 years old. They are 4 generations away from when the product was introduced. Don't you think that consumer package company now needs an innovative entrepreneurial person to figure out how to reposition a brand? Because why abandon the brand when you could reframe it and take some of the goodwill that already exists in the following. But you need a new thing, you need new packaging, you need maybe a new ambassador. So there's so many entrepreneurial opportunities, even in a corporate context. So don't sleep on that as an opportunity.
Right. And then the finer point too, you're getting paid a salary and you have upside.
There
So
you go.
sometimes in life, like it's nice to draw a salary too. There's sometimes in life you swing for it, but drawing a salary, that's
There's
important too.
no shame in that game. You are right, James.
Yeah. One thing about just getting back to some of the students, so another thing I hear is that I'm not a business-minded person. I am a history student. I'm a actor or actress. I'm a designer. I don't feel like I need to learn about money and about accounting and some finance. And so we're trying to encourage that how it's a broad entrepreneurship, right? It's a mindset, multi-skill, multi-system. So you are you are front and back of camera, Carla, right? Like
Yes.
talent and producer. Like, so what would you say to some of the students who are sort of reluctant to take an entrepreneurship class and money gets them a little bit, gives them hives a little bit? What would you say?
Yeah, I would tell them that it's well worth their while. One of the best investments that they're going to make in the 4 years that they're at Howard is because understanding money, especially if you want to be an entrepreneur, you do not want to be in a position where you don't understand how things work, especially as you go out to solicit other people's capital. Because if you don't really understand how things work, you can go very quickly from having your own business and raising money to working for someone because you didn't understand valuation and you gave
Yeah.
away too much of the company when you were trying to raise capital. You didn't understand your own value, so you underpriced your products or your services. So I understand that money and numbers can be a little intimidating, but you owe it to yourself, especially if you think you want to become an entrepreneur. You owe it to yourself to take the class so that you at least understand the broad concepts of what's an income statement. What are the pieces on an income statement? What's the difference between an income statement and a balance sheet? What does a cash flow statement actually tell me? What does it mean for me to actually manage payroll, and why I can't just take the money in from the sales, put it in my pocket, and actually funnel it back into the business? So at least understand that. I meet so many entrepreneurs, James, with great ideas, great companies, big market opportunities, and they are afraid, scared to death of the financial piece. And they abdicate it to someone else. And while you might have a treasurer or a CFO or somebody else who are managing the finances of the business, you have to have a cursory knowledge so that you can ask the right questions. So you don't wake up one morning and find that you've been taken advantage of, frankly.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, right? And some, I also hear, but I may get a bad grade. And my response is generally, who care?
Yeah.
Long
Get the
term.
get the C, but understand the difference between the income statement and the balance sheet and the cash flow statement. And I guarantee you that if you lean in a little bit, you won't get the C.
And for the creatives out there, there's a lot of innovation, right, going on with NFTs, and there's a whole movement about who
Uh-huh.
owns creative.
That's right.
If you can do the creative and understand the money, double
Then you can
threat.
certainly build wealth quickly in today's environment. That is correct.
Yeah. So we're running out of time, and I wanted to so thank you very much for doing this,
Most
Carla.
welcome. It's been a pleasure and fun.
Yeah, and it's fun. Like we could do this for a couple more
Now you
hours.
see how I felt when I was interviewing you. It was a lot of fun.
It is. How am I doing, by the way? Not
Oh,
bad,
very
right?
well, very well.
Okay, all right. So I'm about to embark on this journey at Howard, and what would you say, James? Please be sure that you are teaching them or exposing them to blank. What would you advise me?
Please make sure you teach them to have no fear, because fear is a great impediment. It is the thing that stops most of us, any of us, for really going for what we really want and even articulating what we really want. And you know, James, one of the other statements that I coined that I say every time I have the privilege and the honor of speaking in front of a group of people, that is, fear has no place in your success equation. Fear has no place in your success equation. Anytime you approach anything in your life, personally or professionally, from a position of fear, you always under penetrate that opportunity. So teach them, James, to have no fear.
Yeah, you know, Dr. Frederick, when he asked me if I would hold this position for a few years, he said, James, have our students think big, which I think is a first cousin to having no fear.
Yes, sir. I would agree.
Yeah. And remember, everyone, so these systems are designed and written by humans. And so part of going to a great place like Howard is to be able to take a pencil and rewrite and erase. And that's not having fear, and that's thinking big. Thank you very much, Carla, for on behalf of the Howard community, on behalf of everyone listening in, and for so many people that you impact every day in all of the hats that you wear, and they're all related. You've impacted so many lives, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to hold you up to the students and everyone listening at Howard and say, this is a leader. You are a leader, like on every level, and an entrepreneur on every level. So I wanted to say thank you. So thank you very much. And look, over time, this is the first, there's another episode that's coming in. I will be live from Austin, Texas, down at the Conscious Capitalism Summit, where I'm on the board. I'll be spending time with CEOs from wide ranging of industries. We're going to introduce the concept of B Corps versus C Corps. And we'll have some exposure to issues about what is the future of capitalism next week. So thank you, Carla, and enjoy, everybody. Thank you.